Welcome to Ambient Bird. Join me as I take you through our visit to the Vatican Museum and the Sistine Chapel. As a heads up, I want to mention that some viewers will not agree with our view or comments, and that's okay. This was our experience, so please continue to watch to see our thoughts. When we booked our Mediterranean cruise, one of the highlights was that it ended in Rome. With Rome being on our must-do list, this was the perfect opportunity to visit some of the world's most popular sites. We wanted to see the Vatican's historic architecture. Its beautiful halls. The exquisite craftsmanship. Statues of people I had no idea who they were. I also wanted to be able to answer Robin Williams' question. You know, that one from the scene in Good Will Hunting?
I bet you can't tell me what it smells like in the Sistine Chapel. You never actually stood there and looked up at that beautiful ceiling.
Yeah, that's the one. Well, let me tell you. I know what the Sistine Chapel smells like. It smells like perspiration and frustration. I was so let down by our experience that I made a frustrated Facebook post during our visit that I said the Vatican is the Disneyland for Catholics. But more on that later in this video. But let's start at the beginning. After we booked our cruise, I started looking for tickets for the two biggest attractions in Rome, the Colosseum and the Vatican. We had a wonderful time at the Colosseum, and it will be covered in a different video. The Vatican turned out to be a different story. In the weeks leading up to our time in Rome, we started to see some Facebook group posts that tour operators were canceling tours that had been booked for months and doing it just a day or two before people had them scheduled. This was due to the sheer volume of tourists that were flocking to Europe, and in particular Italy. Now, we're not naive. We know that Rome in July is going to be hot, it's going to be extremely busy, and we were mentally prepared for this. But nothing prepared us for the experience we had in the Vatican Museum. We use Get Your Guide to purchase Vatican tickets as they are an official partner with the Vatican Museum. In using them, we received official Vatican Museum tickets that we didn't have to worry about being canceled. The tickets included entry into the museum, entry into the Sistine Chapel, and an open-top bus ride through the gardens. One quick note. Many ticket options say includes admission to the Sistine Chapel, making it sound like it's an extra or an additional ticket you're receiving. In all actuality, if you purchase a Vatican Museum ticket, the Sistine Chapel is part of that admission ticket. There's no need to look for tickets that specify chapel entry. You simply need a ticket to the museum. Since Get Your Guide is an official partner, we're able to bypass the massive line that was already lined up outside the walls. There had to be thousands of people already lined up in the 95-degree heat at 9:30 in the morning. We tried to book as early as possible, but even purchasing a ticket 3 months in advance, the earliest we could get was 10:30 a.m. without spending hundreds of euros per person for a specialized tour. Luckily for everybody that purchased from Get Your Guide, they have their own entry gate different from the general admission line. We practically walked right in. We did arrive about 45 minutes early to our 10:30 time slot as we were concerned about how long the security line would be. We were able to enter about 30 minutes prior to our designated time, so at 10 a.m. we were let in and breezed right through security with almost no wait. From there, we entered the ticket lobby where we had to have our passes scanned and turn into actual physical tickets. We went to the upper level where the guided tour windows were, and again, there was almost no wait. Purchasing tickets from Get Your Guide really saved us hours of waiting in the general admission line and ticket windows. A+ to their service, and I do recommend using them if you plan on purchasing tickets. And no, we did not get paid by them. We are strictly normal users of their app. From here, we had about a 20-minute wait until our group was called. Our handler was less than friendly and took our group about 25 or so through a few different levels to the back entrance where an open-top tour bus was waiting. We even passed by the Get Your Guide desk where we thought we would stop and get our audio headsets, but she was leading our group in such a hurry that nobody stopped in fear of losing her in the crowded hallways. We boarded the bus, which I was less than impressed with. Even though it was an open bus, the window coverings were still very obstructive. And since we were the last ones boarded, we had the back row where our only visibility was through pretty much tiny clear windows that were cut in the side. Perhaps I should have done a little more research on the vehicles they used, but I didn't, I admit it. But with a property like the Vatican Gardens, a vehicle like the Le Petit train used in other tourist cities would have been a much better choice. The garden tour was nothing special. The driver drove his route and we were given disposable headphones which plugged in at the seat, told us all about the different buildings we were driving by. My biggest criticism is that while the guests were able to stroll out through the gardens, we didn't stop and actually get out at any of these spots. just drove by, and occasionally the driver would stop for 10 or 15 seconds so people could snap pictures from the half-open windows. Other spots which I thought deserved more attention, we just drove right past, like, oh, there's the Pope's Rose Garden. If you do visit the Vatican Museum, I do recommend skipping the open-top bus tour and just stroll the gardens yourself. It'll be a little bit more walking, but it'll be way more enjoyable. Once the 45-minute or so bus tour was over, we were dropped right back where we started and found our way to the courtyard where we grabbed a quick snack. We studied the map and then found our way into the exhibit hall's entrance. This is where things started to take a turn for the worse. It was people, more people, all being herded through different galleries like cattle. It was hot as there's no AC, there's absolutely no air movement, and there are no open windows. It's just a long swarm of people just walking shoulder to shoulder through a long maze with no exits, which more on that in a bit, all looking to reach the Sistine Chapel. The corridors are miles long, and it will take an hour and a half to 2 hours. There are some absolutely beautiful things to see, if you could actually stop without fear of getting trampled. Once we actually did reach the chapel, we were crammed in the main area where an ironically loud announcement said, "Be quiet! The chapel is sacred! Do not take pictures or video!" And it was repeated more than once. We looked at Michelangelo's masterpiece for a few minutes and decided we just had enough. We saw the exit, and then after navigating a few more halls, we reached the end where, of course, it takes you through the restaurants and the gift shop. Once outside, we grabbed a bench to sit and cool down. Yes, it was actually cooler outside in the 95-degree heat than it was inside the museum. During this time is when I made my Facebook post. My post received quite a bit of traffic, with the replies being 50-50, either supporting me or condemning me. Some even calling me a bigot and saying I had an axe to grind at the church. To give our viewers some insight to us, I am Mexican-American and was raised as such. We had statues of Guadalupe in just about every room of the house. In fact, it is estimated that over 60% of Mexican Americans identify as Catholic. I am one of those. The importance of the Pope, the Catholic Church, and its sanctity is not lost on me, nor is this a video to criticize the church. What this is a video of, though, is our experiences of visiting a tourist destination and a museum's unsafe practices that put people at risk. In the last few weeks, I reflected upon my experience, was thinking, maybe I was too critical or my expectations were set too high. After all, it was high season at one of the world's most popular tourist locations. But then I did a bit of research and came across news articles written 10 to 15 years ago documenting the same problem we just experienced. Massive crowds, no climate control, and the museum allowing more visitors in than they know they could accommodate. In reading an article from The Guardian written 7 years ago, I learned that there are only 2 exits in the mile-long Sistine Chapel passageway, one in the beginning and one in the end. Tour guides have expressed concerns for their safety, and even museum custodians expressed written concern back in 2016. And of course, they were reprimanded as well. In fact, tour guides say about 10 people a day pass out in the museum halls. The Vatican Museum has a problem, and they know it. They have started a timed entry system that does absolutely nothing to help the problem. All the timed entry system does is push the eventual cluster further into the corridors, as eventually the staggered groups will meet up as thousands of people try to make their way through the entry doors that are scarily narrow. The other issue is, most of the visitors are there to see nothing more than the Sistine Chapel. This is where my Disney comment comes into play. Once inside the Disney bubble, they control everything from what you do, to what you eat, to what you buy. This was eerily similar to what we felt during our visit. Disney will even sell anything with their logo on it, and it seems the museum will do the same. Why else would things like the Vatican perfume or Vatican Museum Slinky be available for purchase? The exception is that when Disney has an attraction that is more popular than others, it will require a separate reservation and a separate ticket. I think this is the route the museum needs to take with the Sistine Chapel. Having its own entry requirements would alleviate the congestion that occurs in the hall. The majority of visitors are just there to see the chapel only, so why not let them? Why require them to crowd the halls with other visitors, and in turn, nobody gets an opportunity to see and appreciate those works of art? I also think the museum needs to seriously limit the number of tickets it's selling even further. If they're concerned about losing revenue, and let's be honest, it always comes down to money, then raise the price of admission to offset the lower number of tickets being sold. The museum is an absolute bargain at €17, but I would have gladly paid double if it meant I was actually able to enjoy it with half the number of people in attendance. Now, in regards to the whole no pictures in the chapel announcements we heard a few times, I have a few thoughts on that as well. I, for the life of me, cannot understand the reasoning behind this except for what I've already stated. The whole visit to the museums is all about money. I've watched plenty of YouTube videos where vloggers were allowed to film inside the chapel with permission of the guards. And just a couple months ago, Jason Momoa was taking pictures with the security guards during a private visit. The backlash was actually so severe that he had to issue an apology afterwards. While I definitely agree that the Sistine Chapel is among the most sacred places on earth, why wouldn't other basilicas, including St. Peter's, be given the same respect? This really has a whole feel of treating members of society differently. If they're going to claim no photos are allowed because of sacredness, then why was it Porsche was literally allowed to run out to Sistine Chapel, in which they sold tickets for a private dinner and concert? Now, that event did include a sizable donation to Pope Francis's Art for Charity project, but let's be real, the Sistine Chapel was rented out for a private event. The spokesperson even said that the initiative was targeted at large companies and he hopes others would follow suit. That doesn't sound very sacred to me. Perhaps it has to do more with the deal the Vatican struck with Nippon TV when restoration of the paintings was needed and the Vatican didn't have the funds to pay for it. This deal was widely publicized when it was agreed upon in 1980 and was in effect for essentially 20 years. Nippon TV was given exclusive copyright for Michelangelo's paintings for 3 years after each panel was completed. During this period, no photographs were allowed, and even after the copyrights expired, the museum continued the practice. I believe one thing was learned during this deal, and that is this. There is money in controlling an image of one of the world's most well-known paintings. I mean, if visitors were allowed to take pictures of the ceiling, then they could sell their own Sistine Chapel Rubik's Cube. Now, are some of my comments harsh? Perhaps, but I don't think they're wrong. The Vatican has a cash cow in the museums, and they know it, and I think they're going to milk it for all it's worth. That is until visitors either demand change or a tragedy occurs. Let's just hope it's the former and not the latter.